They completely lose their composure and may continue reacting for years when you do these 10 things. It is easy to notice that narcissists often struggle to stay calm. They usually have an extremely low tolerance for frustration, rejection, failure, criticism, or disappointment. Even situations that most people would brush off can feel overwhelming to them because their emotional resilience is much weaker than it appears. It is important to remember that beneath the confident exterior, narcissists are often deeply insecure individuals. The grand image they create of themselves rarely matches their actual abilities, accomplishments, or character. Even the smallest reminder of that difference can trigger what psychologists describe as a narcissistic injury. A narcissistic injury is a psychological reaction in which they lose emotional control, often directing intense anger toward the person who exposed their mistakes, questioned their behavior, or held them responsible for their actions. This is not an invitation to intentionally provoke or upset someone with narcissistic traits. Doing so is rarely productive and can sometimes be dangerous. However, understanding what exposes their true nature can help you recognize unhealthy patterns much more clearly. In this video, we are going to explore 10 things that commonly trigger powerful emotional reactions in narcissists. Number 10 is holding them accountable. Expecting a narcissist to accept responsibility for their actions is one of the quickest ways to provoke an emotional response. Individuals with strong narcissistic traits are widely known for avoiding admissions of guilt, especially when their mistakes suggest they are imperfect, incompetent, or capable of causing harm. Even a simple request for honesty can feel like a personal attack to them. This resistance usually comes from fragile self-esteem and an unstable sense of identity. Instead of acknowledging their shortcomings, they often compensate by acting superior, entitled, or overly confident. Their grandiose behavior is designed to protect them from confronting painful feelings about themselves. Accepting responsibility would force them to admit that they are no better than anyone else, and that realization threatens the carefully constructed image they depend on. Because their ego is so delicate, they often rely on denial, excuses, rationalizations, blame shifting, projection, and scapegoating to escape accountability. Rather than reflecting on their actions, they search for someone else to carry the blame. Number 9 is refusing to give them immediate gratification. A large review of narcissism research conducted by psychologists Simon Visser and David Funder concluded that impulsivity is one of the defining characteristics of narcissistic personalities. Instead of patiently working toward meaningful, long-term goals, they often chase instant rewards that satisfy their need for admiration, attention, social status, or emotional excitement. If you deny them something they believe they deserve immediately, they frequently experience intense frustration. Whether it is attention, praise, affection, validation, or special treatment, they often expect instant access to whatever feeds their ego. When those expectations are not met, their emotional reaction can become surprisingly intense because they feel personally deprived of something they believe belongs to them. Number 8 is confronting their unhealthy behavior directly. Narcissists generally dislike criticism more than almost anything else. Even when the criticism is respectful, accurate, and completely justified, they rarely experience it as helpful feedback. Instead, they often interpret it as humiliation or a personal attack. Mental health expert Dr. Ramani Durvasula has explained that confronting a narcissist publicly can trigger overwhelming feelings of shame. Rather than processing those emotions in a healthy way, they frequently convert that shame into anger, denial, blame shifting, defensiveness, or lengthy speeches designed to portray themselves as the true victim. Even addressing their behavior privately often produces similar results. Pointing out selfishness, manipulation, entitlement, dishonesty, or passive-aggressive behavior rarely leads to genuine self-reflection, because accepting those observations would require them to challenge the image they have built around themselves. Instead of listening carefully, they usually become defensive and attempt to redirect the conversation away from their own behavior. Number 7 is touching their deepest insecurities. Ironically, the more narcissists depend on an inflated self-image, the more insecure they often become underneath. Their confidence is frequently built on unstable foundations that require constant reinforcement from the outside world. Many narcissists carry deep insecurities about their physical appearance, intelligence, financial success, career achievements, popularity, relationships, social standing, or overall worth. Virtually anything that can be compared with other people becomes emotionally sensitive because their identity depends so heavily on external validation. Since they care intensely about how others perceive them, even subtle reminders that they possess ordinary human flaws can provoke powerful feelings of shame. Instead of accepting those imperfections, they may become hostile, defensive, or emotionally explosive because those comments threaten the image they work so hard to maintain. Number 6 is refusing to argue with them. Narcissists are naturally argumentative and often seem to thrive on conflict. Creating chaos allows them to dominate conversations, distract from their own behavior, and keep the focus exactly where they want it. For many of them, conflict becomes another source of attention, emotional energy, and what many people refer to as narcissistic supply. When you calmly refuse to participate in unnecessary arguments, something important happens. You remove the emotional fuel they were hoping to receive. If you also avoid lengthy explanations or attempts to justify your decision, they lose another opportunity to manipulate the conversation. This lack of emotional engagement can frustrate them far more than a heated argument ever could. Without someone responding emotionally, many of their usual tactics become much less effective, leaving them feeling powerless and increasingly irritated. Number 5 is suggesting they might benefit from professional help. Simply mentioning that a highly narcissistic individual could benefit from speaking with a therapist or mental health professional is often enough to trigger a strong emotional reaction. Rather than considering the suggestion, they commonly respond with denial, blame, gaslighting, or outright hostility. Some may immediately insist that you are actually the one who needs therapy. Others may deny that anything is wrong with them at all. They might even accuse you of trying to label them as mentally unstable simply because you disagree with them or want to distance yourself from their behavior. Instead of seeing therapy as an opportunity for growth, they often interpret it as proof that someone believes they are fundamentally flawed. Because protecting their ego is their highest priority, they usually reject the idea before giving it serious consideration. Number 4 is establishing clear boundaries. Strong, healthy boundaries remain one of the most effective ways to manage narcissistic behavior. Unfortunately, they are also among the things narcissists dislike the most. Narcissists often prefer one-sided relationships where they enjoy complete freedom while expecting everyone else to tolerate repeated boundary violations. They may believe they deserve unlimited access to your time, energy, emotions, and attention without offering the same respect in return. Many view people less as equal partners and more as sources of validation, convenience, or emotional supply. Because of this mindset, someone who calmly enforces personal boundaries challenges the entire dynamic they are trying to create. When you consistently say no, refuse manipulation, and maintain your limits without guilt, they frequently react with anger, silent treatment, guilt trips, intimidation, or other attempts to regain control. Healthy boundaries reduce their ability to manipulate others, which is exactly why they resist them so strongly. Number 3 is threatening their sense of power and control. Narcissists become deeply uncomfortable when they realize their influence over another person is beginning to fade. They dislike recognizing that their manipulation is no longer producing the desired results, or that someone has started thinking independently. In their worldview, they prefer to be the person who decides when relationships begin, when they end, and how every interaction unfolds. Accepting that another person has equal freedom to establish limits or walk away challenges their belief that they should always remain in control. As that control begins slipping away, they may increase manipulation in an effort to pull the other person back into the relationship. This can include empty promises, exaggerated declarations of change, insincere apologies, emotional blackmail, future faking, or dramatic displays of affection that disappear once they regain influence. Sometimes they even end the relationship first, not because they truly want it to end, but because they cannot tolerate someone else making that decision before they do. Remaining in control often matters more to them than preserving the relationship itself. Number 2 is being rejected or left behind. Narcissists generally struggle with rejection and abandonment, particularly in romantic relationships. If they believe their partner is considering leaving, emotionally distancing themselves, or preparing for a breakup, they often experience intense emotional distress. For someone with narcissistic tendencies, rejection is not simply about losing a relationship. It represents a loss of control, status, admiration, and validation. Because of that, they may react with anger, manipulation, love bombing, guilt, or sudden indifference, depending on which strategy they believe will restore their advantage. In some situations, they choose to end the relationship themselves before the other person has the chance. Doing so allows them to maintain the illusion that they remained in charge from beginning to end, even if the relationship had already fallen apart emotionally. Finally, number 1 is exposing their vulnerability. More than anything else, narcissists are driven by a powerful need to protect themselves from appearing weak, imperfect, or emotionally vulnerable. Their greatest fear is not necessarily failure itself, but having others witness that failure. Their entire self-image is built around maintaining an appearance of superiority, confidence, and control. Anything that exposes insecurity, weakness, hypocrisy, or personal flaws threatens the foundation of that carefully maintained identity. Being publicly confronted with their mistakes or having their contradictions exposed can create genuine psychological distress. To outside observers, their reactions may seem wildly disproportionate to the situation. Something that appears minor to everyone else may feel catastrophic to them because it damages the image they have worked tirelessly to protect. This constant effort to avoid appearing flawed also prevents meaningful personal growth. Since admitting mistakes feels emotionally unbearable, they often avoid learning from them altogether. Instead of accepting responsibility and making positive changes, they continue defending the same unhealthy behaviors that keep them trapped in an endless cycle of conflict and insecurity. Understanding these patterns is not about judging or provoking people with narcissistic traits. It is about recognizing unhealthy dynamics so you can make wiser decisions, protect your emotional well-being, and maintain healthier relationships. The more clearly you understand these behaviors, the less confusing and overwhelming they become when you encounter them in real life. If you found this video helpful, you may also enjoy another discussion on this subject where we explore narcissistic behavior in even greater depth. Thank you for watching. Remember to approach each new day with awareness. Trust your instincts, protect your peace, and continue building the healthiest life possible. Stay strong, keep growing, and now let's move on to 5 surprisingly difficult questions that narcissists almost never know how to answer. Questions that can help you regain clarity, confidence, and a stronger sense of control. Have you grown tired of feeling controlled by someone who believes they always know better than everyone else? Breaking free from that kind of influence can seem incredibly difficult, but you are in the right place to discover practical and effective ways to deal with these kinds of manipulators. If this is your first time here, consider subscribing so you do not miss future videos like this. Together, we can reclaim a sense of control and show these self-appointed experts who is truly in charge. Now, let us begin with the very first question that a narcissist has an extremely difficult time answering honestly. And it all revolves around the truth. People who are deeply self-absorbed frequently lie, even about situations where there is absolutely no reason to be dishonest. They may distort obvious facts or invent stories when the truth would have worked just as well. For people who genuinely value honesty and transparency, this kind of behavior can be incredibly confusing, frustrating, and even exhausting to witness. Consider this example. There was a situation in which a mother forced her teenage son out of the house in the middle of the night, throwing all of his belongings onto the front lawn. The father, who was already in the middle of a divorce, took the boy into his own home. But what happened afterward caught everyone completely off guard. The mother then contacted the school transportation service and requested that they begin picking her son up from his father's address instead, acting as though nothing unusual had ever taken place. If reality is sometimes stranger than fiction, then the world of narcissists takes that idea to an entirely different level. To keep the story brief, let us return to the soon-to-be ex-wife from that example. She decided to take legal action by filing a motion claiming that her husband had taken their son away without her knowledge or permission. The remarkable part was that the email she had sent that very same evening directly contradicted the accusation she later made. The evidence was sitting there in plain sight, yet she behaved as though it did not exist. It can be difficult to understand how someone could show that level of confidence while presenting a story that clearly conflicts with documented facts. This is where it helps to remember one important reality. For a narcissist, the truth often feels almost toxic. It threatens the carefully constructed image they have created of themselves. Whenever you question their motives or challenge inconsistencies in their story, they often find themselves unable to provide a straightforward answer. Instead, they rely on avoidance, denial, distraction, blame shifting, and projection to escape responsibility. Rather than admitting they were wrong, they search for another explanation that protects their self-image. I have spoken extensively about this exact behavioral pattern before because it appears so frequently. However, something even more fascinating happens when a narcissist is caught in a clear and undeniable lie. Instead of admitting the truth, They will often go to extraordinary lengths to escape accountability. They may change the subject, rewrite history, attack the person confronting them, or invent entirely new explanations to maintain the illusion that they have done nothing wrong. This pattern repeats itself so consistently that it almost becomes predictable. The bottom line is simple. A narcissist struggles to tolerate plain, unfiltered truth. They will often use nearly every psychological defense available to avoid facing it directly. Once you recognize this pattern, you can gradually begin breaking through the illusion they have created. You do not have to argue endlessly or overwhelm them with evidence. Instead, introducing small pieces of undeniable truth over time often exposes the cracks in the carefully maintained facade. Now let us move on to the second area that narcissists genuinely struggle with, and that is recognizing the contributions of other people. Imagine that an incredible party was organized, or an outstanding idea transformed a project at work. Do not expect a narcissist to willingly acknowledge everyone who helped make it happen. If you ask who deserves the credit, chances are they will mention themselves long before they mention anyone else. The reason behind this behavior is relatively simple. Deep down, they fear that recognizing another person's success somehow diminishes their own importance. They often see praise as though it exists in limited supply. If someone else receives recognition, they feel as though there is somehow less left for them. It resembles an extreme scarcity mindset, where every compliment directed toward another person feels like a personal loss. Instead of celebrating someone else's achievements, they experience discomfort because attention has shifted away from them.